Boker Tov. Daf Yomi is Yevamos Daf Yevamos 17, and we're studying today in memory of Ruvain ben Shlomo v'Sara Malka and Neshama should have an Aliyah, and also we're studying in memory of Gray's family, Bobby Thomas, Beverly, her mother Beverly, and her grandmother Grace. So we are going to start on 16b, just 4 lines from the bottom, where the Gemara taught. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maravasi, Obe Kochavim Shekidesh, Bizman Azeh Choshel Kedushin. A tremendous idea. He says, let's say an idolater comes along and wants to do Kedushin. Kedushin is the legally binding process of marriage according to Jewish law. So if an idolater comes along and he tries to betroth the Jewish woman, he says to the Jewish woman, Harei ad mekudesh ali, behold, you are betrothed to me. Then we have to be concerned that maybe it's a valid betrothal, and therefore they'd have to get a divorce, get if they entered the relationship. But how can that be? So he explains, Shema me'aseres hashvatami, because we're concerned that maybe she's from the 10 minor tribes. Since we're concerned that maybe she's from the 10, we're concerned that maybe he's from the 10 lost tribes. And so since we're concerned that maybe he's from the 10 lost tribes, therefore we have to be concerned that it's a valid kedushin. What does it mean that the concern is from the 10 lost tribes? And maybe it was a man who had married an idolatress, and this Rav it would be saying that if there's a Jewish man who marries an idolatress, the offspring is going to be a mamzer, and so therefore we have to be concerned that this person was a mamzer, and so therefore if they come along and do a kedushin, the kedushin of a mamzer is a valid kedushin, or we're concerned that it might be valid, and so therefore. If somebody comes along and says they're an idolater and then they betroth a woman, we have to be concerned that maybe it's a valid betrothal. So the Gemara says, but what about the fact that there's the majority, and the majority of the people in the world are not Jewish? I called it Parsh Meruba Parsh. Most of the people in the world are not Jewish. So why don't we just say that this is an idolater? It's not a Jew. The Gemara says, B'duchta dekvi. No, it's in a place where the people are fixed. So therefore, we know for sure that the 10 tribes settled in this place. Since we know for sure the 10 tribes settled in this place, it's a place where it was fixed. So therefore, we have a concept, even though we follow the majority, but if there's something that was fixed in a specific spot, there's a biblical concept, or some say it's a biblical concept, that 50-50 is like the same thing as fixed. And so therefore, we don't apply the principles of majority if there is something fixed in a place. Because the case is if you find something in a butcher shop, even though the majority of the butcher shops are going to be kosher, but if you find something in a specific butcher shop where you don't know if that one is kosher or not, then we would not say apply the principle of the majority. Tosfos has a different explanation of this. Tosfos says no, because since in that place the majority of the people are from the 10 tribes, therefore we don't say that we follow the majority. The Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana. Because Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana taught that when Sancherib, the king of when Melech Asher, when he exiled the Jewish people, the 10 tribes, where did it say? It says Vayachim Bachach B'Chabor Nahar Gozen V'Arei Madai, and that he led them into all these places. Chalach is Chilazon, Chabor is Chadayav, Nahar Gozen, that's Ginza, Arei Madai, that's Hamdan and Chavrosah. Va'amru, and some say this is Niyar and its suburbs. And Chavar said, Man, who are its suburbs? Are on top of 17a. Amar Shmuel, Krach, Mushli, Chidki, V'Dumkaya. These are the towns of Mushli, Chidki, and Dumkaya. And Amar Rabbi Yochanan taught the Kulon of Sol. So all the people from all those places, they're all disqualified for 2 reasons. Either because they were from a Jewish man, an idolatrous woman, which made it idolaters, or else because we're saying that the people there were not careful. They were just completely not careful with the laws of Harayos, and so therefore they married people they weren't supposed to, and they had mamzerim. And it says Rabbi Yochanan the Kulon of Sol. So all these places, the offspring from there is mamzerim. But then Rabbi Yehuda says, "Kamrisa kamei de Shmuel." I went in front of Shmuel to teach him, and I said to him, "Bincha." Shmuel said to him, "No." The teaching is when the verse states, "Ki asir es bincha me'acharai," that they will cause your son to go away from you. What does that mean? Bincha Your son who comes from a Jewish woman, that's called your son. So Shmuel said, if the woman was an idolatress and she gives birth to a child, the child's not Jewish. And so therefore, you don't have to be concerned. You don't have to be concerned that their moms are. It's not a Jewish child. So that's what Shmuel is saying. It's called her son. So therefore, if the 10 tribes, if it was a Jewish man with an idolatrous woman, it's not a Jew. So therefore, you don't have to be concerned that the child was a mom's there. Mar says, yeah, but what about the fact? Banos. But what about the Jewish girls? The Ravina said that if it was a Jewish girl with an idolatrous man, their offspring is considered to be Jewish. So why don't you have to be concerned that they married amongst all the people there and they weren't keeping the laws of the Torah, and then they made mamzerim? So the Gemara explains, Gemiri, we have a tradition that from when those 10 tribes were exiled, we have a tradition that Bante Dahu Dara, it's Daruye, it's Daru. The women of that generation, they made it so that they wouldn't be able to have children because they didn't want to be producing their children from these assaults. They were concerned they were going to be assaulted by the idolatrous men. And so therefore they pierced their bodies to make sure that they wouldn't be able to have children. And so therefore that's the concept. That's the concept that it was impossible that the 10 tribes would be Jewish. They lost 10 tribes because the man with the idolatrous woman, then the offspring is not Jewish. And the Jewish woman of that generation did not produce any children. So therefore, if somebody would say to you, they're from the 10 tribes, you would say, okay, maybe you have a historical connection with us, but halachically, legally, you're not of the Jewish faith. You're not Jewish. So the Gemara explains, or alternative explanation is Ikad Amri Kamrisa Kamei de Shmuel. When it was said in front of Shmuel, he said, Shmuel said, at that time, the generation, the rabbis, they didn't move until they established all those 10 tribes who were sent amongst the exiles. They're scattered. They said, you're idolaters. We no longer consider you Jewish. As it says, Ba'ashem Bagadu, Kibanim Zarim Yoladu. They rebelled against God. They gave birth to foreign children. Yosef Rav Yosef Achor Rav Kahana, Yosef Rav Kahana, Kamed Rav Yehuda. So they're sitting. Yosef Kamar Asidin Yisrael Da'avdi Yom Tova. Said in the future, we're going to make a great festival for the Jewish people, Kicharvi Tarmud, when Tarmud will be destroyed, because Tarmud was where all the mamzerim, all these sketchy lineage were coming from, and they were making the Jewish people less pure lineage. So the Gemara says, but Talmud is already destroyed. No. So he says, Ahi Talmud. That what was destroyed was Talmud. So Rashi Amar, Hainu Talmud. They said it's the same town. But it was like they built like a twin city. If one side was destroyed, they built up the other side. And if one side was destroyed, they built up the other side. Yosef Ramamnuna Kamedu Ula. So Ramamnuna was once sitting in front of Ula. The Kohavi B'Shmaita. And he was asking him tremendous questions. He said, "Oh, so when Ur heard this, he said, Ma Gavra, wow, what a guy! Ma Gavra, what a guy! Too bad he loved the Harpinia mouse." He said, "Too bad you come from Harpinia. Harpinia is this place of the Mamzerim. You have very sketchy lineage. Other than that, you're a great guy. So you're asking great questions." Amar Rav Zera. So he says, "Ichsef." He got upset. He saw Rav Abdullah was embarrassed. So he said, he said, "Oh, where do you pay your taxes?" He says, "Where do you pay your taxes?" He says, "I'm going from Nahara." He says, "I pray to from Nahara." He says, "Well, in came me from Nahara." Okay, you're no longer Arpanya, you're from Nahara. So, by the way, this is like a subversive story, because here now, up until now, the first 17 pages or 16 pages of this chapter, we're talking about not making mamzerim, that you don't want to make these people of poor lineage. All of a sudden, it comes at the very end of the chapter, Rav Amnuna was challenging Ula, and Rav Amnuna has these brilliant questions, and he says, "Oh, but wait, your lineage is no good. Oh, I'll tell you how we can cure that. We'll fix that. Pay your taxes elsewhere, and we'll solve that problem. We have a bureaucratic fix. We have a loophole to solve the problems." Yeah. So That's what I say, what we could call maybe a subversive story that really undermines everything we've been studying the last 16 days.
Also called a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, backhanded, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, exactly. So he says, so
You're great, you're a
so
great
it says,
little bastard.
my Arpanya, what's Arpanya? Arpanya is the mountain that everybody turns to. Meaning to say, Rashi says, if you want to get a shidduch, you go to this mountain. Masnisa Tana, and we learned the Brisa, Kol she'em makir mishpachto v'shivto nifno Hashem. Whoever doesn't know their family or their tribe, they go to this town. As people don't know their lineage. Amarava via Muka Mishal. Rava says this is even worse. The end up there is even worse than ending up in Sheol, which is another way of saying hell. As it states, Miyad Sheol Eftaim. From Sheol I can redeem you. Mimavas Agoim. So if you end up in hell in Gehenna, you could be redeemed. But if you have bad lineage, you can't even fix that. Gemara says, Psui da Arpanya, all the people messed up in Arpanya, their lineage is Misham Psui de Mishon. It comes from Mishon. Psui de Mishon, Misham Psui de Tamar. They come from Tamar. Psui de Tamar, Misham Avdei Shlomo. Goes back to the servants of Solomon. They messed up. How did they mess up? Because the servants of Solomon, they married the Jewish women, and that caused them to be mamzerim. If you have a large kav or a small kav, it keeps rolling and making problems. Also a Sha'ol, it goes all the way to Sha'ol, Misha'ol, Tarmud, Mitarmud, Lamesham, Mimesham, Harpanya. Okay, so it all works together. Anyway, Hajjan al Chamesh Esrei Nashim. We conclude the first chapter, but we'll return to you Chamesh Esrei Nashim. Now we start the second chapter. Our first mission had listed 15 relatives who not only do you not do Yibam with them, you also don't do it with their co-wives. The number 14 out of this 15th was the wife of a brother who was not in the world with you at the same time. So that person does not fall to Yibam or Chalitza. Meaning to say, the co-wife of such a woman can automatically remarry. Gemara describes what this circumstance is. What is such a case? So let's say you have Shnei Achim. Let's say you have two brothers. Umeis Echaman, and one of them dies. So let's say you have the brothers Reuven and Shimon, and then Reuven dies. Reuven is married to Sarah, and Reuven dies. And then they give birth to a third brother. That's called Levi. And then Shimon does Yibam with his with Reuven's widow, i.e. with Sarah. Umeis, and now Shimon dies. So now we have Levi. Levi was not alive when Reuven was alive. So we say at this pace, Harishona, that is Sarah, Yotza Misham Eisha Sachem. So now Shimon has died, but he has a wife also. It's called her Rivka. So we're saying under these circumstances, the Rishona, i.e. Sarah was wife of Reuven, Levi doesn't do Yibam with her. She goes out without Yibam, even from Shimon, because she was the wife of the brother, because she's the wife of Reuven, and Levi and Reuven were not alive at the same time. Shnia, and the second wife, i.e. Shimon's wife before he married, or Shimon's wife, irrespective of his marriage to Reuven's widow, Mishum Tsarasa. She also doesn't have Yibam Rachalitza because she's the co-wife of the Erva. And so therefore she's also exempt. Also by Maimer, let's say he didn't Maimer with her. What is Maimer? Even though biblically speaking, you do the Yibam, you do the betrothal just through the sexual act, the rabbi said that that's not appropriate. At first, you do something, it's a rabbinic kinyan, a rabbinic way of sanctifying the relationship, and that is through a contract or through money. So that's called Maimer, like words. So let's say Shimon does Maimer with Reuven's wife Sarah. Now that is not a full marriage, but it's also not nothing. So what is it? Umeis, and then before he does Yibam with her, he dies. Then Shnia Choletzes Lomas Yabemes. So of course, Levi would not do anything with Sarah because she's the wife of his brother is not in the world. But what about with Shimon's wife, who we're saying is Rebecca? Well, he can't do Yibam with her because maybe she was maybe the marriage, maybe the mimer was effective. So therefore, then she's the co-wife. So he can't do it, but he can't not do anything because maybe the mimer was not effective. So he does the chalitza to cover all the bases there. So Amar of Nachman Madin Tani Rishona, we have different versions of exactly the wording of our Mishnah. One version is that the first one goes out because she's the wife of the brother. Rishona refers to what way we've been describing as Sarah. Manta Rishona lo mishtabesh. It's not a bad text. Manta Shnia, one who says Shnia, it's also lo mishtabesh. It's also not a bad text. Manutani Rishona, or on the top of 17b, the one who says the Rishona, lo mishtabesh. Why? What is the Rishona? Rishona l'nefila. Who's the first? Meaning Sarah is the first one to fall to Yibum, and so therefore she's the one who for sure does not do Yibum with Levi because she's the wife of the brother who is not alive at the same time as him. Mandatani Shnia, the one who says the second one, Romishtabish, is also not a bad text, not corrupt. My Shnia Nesuyin. She was the second one who Shimon married, i.e., the second one who falls to Shimon in marriage. So the Gemara says, wait, that's not necessarily true. Isn't it possible to Yavam? It's also possible that Shimon first married Sarah and then he married his second wife. So it's not necessarily the case that Sarah was Shimon's second wife. Now, my Shnia ben Nesuyin. The Shnia can mean is the woman who is now having her second marriage. So that's the woman who that could be the way the Mishnah is referring to. Anyway, the Gemara asks the fundamental question: how do we know that the Eisha Sachar Shalahaya Be'olamo? How do we know the wife of the brother was not in existence at the same time? Does not do Yibam with the newborn brother. How do we know that? Eisha Sachar Shalahaya Be'olamo. How do we know that they don't fall to Yibam? So where is it written in the Torah? It's based on the verse. When the brothers dwell together, means to say that they live together at one time. It excludes the wife of the brother who was not alive at the same time. They never lived together in the world, so therefore the brother can't do Yibam for him. Mara says, and what do we learn from we learn out from the fact that it says they were Ki yeshvu. But what about the fact that it says Yachta? What do we learn from that? That they both have to be able to inherit each other, meaning stay prat la'achav minayim. So inheritance in Jewish law comes from your paternal brother, not your maternal brother. So therefore, this tells us that the Yibam is only with the paternal brother, not the maternal brother. Rabbah says acham min ha'av. No, the fact that we know that Yibam is only with the paternal brother and not the maternal brother, that comes from Achva. It says here, Ki yeshvu acham yachtav, but it says by the sons of Jacob that when they came into Egypt, it says the word achim. They said the word achim, that we are shnei masar avadecha achim anachnu. We are brothers. So we see from here. That's how we learned that idea. Just like Jacob's sons are paternal brothers, not maternal brothers. So too, by Yibam, it's only by a paternal brother, not a maternal brother. Mor says, why don't we compare it to the sexual prohibitions where there we say specifically that you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife, even if it's your maternal brother. So the Gemara says, no, we're not going to learn it. By Arayos, it says it says from your brother. But here it's the exact same word. It's called achim. And so therefore we're not going to compare it to Arayos. So the Gemara says, but my nafkamin, okay, it's not the exact word, but we have a principle throughout Shas that even if the words are not exactly the same, we can learn out from them. Like we learned by the laws of Negai Batim, by the tzaras on the house, because it says Tanbei or Shmuel V'Shavakon and Valakon. Different words are used, but nevertheless we learn out laws from them. And so we say Zui Shiva Zui Bia, because they mean the basically same idea. The Gemara says, yeah, but when can we derive words from words that are similar but not exactly the same? When there's nothing else closer to it. Or there are words that are close to it, we compare it to the closest one. Gemara says, well, why don't we learn out Yibum? This is what Harold here was asking me this morning. Why don't we learn out Yibum from Lot? Because Lot also, it says, Avram says to Lot that we're Achim, we're brothers. And Lot was his nephew. So maybe you have to do Yibum by the wife of a nephew. Gemara says, that Avram said to Lot, we're brothers. No, the Gemara says, no, it's more logical to assume you should compare it to the sons of Jacob, Mishum de Mafne, because the word Achim is extra there. It could have said, we are 12 of your servants. It didn't need to say brothers. It said brothers. The word brothers by the sons of Jacob is meant to do a comparison to Yibam. And when it says that when the brothers dwell together, you do the mitzvah of Yibam, it needs to say both the word Achim and the word Yachtav. Because of Rahmana Achim, if it just said when brothers dwell together, I might have said compare it to Lot and do Yibam even with your nephew's wife. And if you want to say, well, by Lot the word is not free to expound it. No, indeed. It is free there. It could have said we are friends, but Avram said we're brothers. So we see from here that by Lot the word is extra, so therefore you need to write Achim to compare it to Yaakov and not to Lot. And because of Rahmana Yachtav, the Torah writes here Yachtav to teach us that they both can inherit each other. Meaning say paternal brothers. Because of Rahmana Yachtav, the Torah just said paternal brothers. I might have said actually you need both. You need to be both paternal and maternal brothers. So therefore we compare it to Yaakov's children who are just paternal brothers. Tzricha. The Gemara says, wait, why would you ever think Why would you ever think that Yibam has to be by maternal and paternal brothers? Yibam benachot Torah. Yibam is dependent upon an inheritance. And the inheritance is only if you're paternal brothers, not if you're maternal brothers. So the Gemara explains, it's true. No, you needed to tell us that only paternal brothers, that it's paternal brothers and not maternal brothers. Why? Because you might have thought all the chidushu, we might have thought since it's such a new law, the commissary erva gabe ima, that the commissary erva gabe, that since that in this case the erva who's your brother's wife is permitted to you, it's such an unusual law, it's a unique law, it goes against what we learned so far in the Torah about the laws of prohibited relationships. I might have thought, well, then in that case, you need to be both real full brothers, paternal and maternal. So we need the verse to tell us that no, just paternal is sufficient. So now we have a fundamental question. Okay, so now what's the case here? Let's say we have two brothers. We have Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven dies, and his wife is Sarah. And so Shimon is supposed to do Yibum with Sarah, but he hasn't done the Yibum yet. So she's called Shomeres Yibum, Shomeres Yavam. She's waiting for the Yibum. And then Sarah dies in this case. Sarah dies before Yibum happens, but Sarah is a mother. And the mother's name, let's say, is Rebecca. So you're not allowed to marry your wife's mother. But this person, Shimon, never really married Sarah. He just had a connection with her. It's called a Zika. He had a connection with her. So that's the case we're talking about. This woman who was waiting for Yibam, Shemesa, she dies, Mutter be'ima. The brother is allowed to marry her mother. Brother can marry her mother. Alma Kasavar. We see from here, Ein Zika. We see from here that Rav Huna in the name of Rav does not hold that there's this concept of Zika, that it's the same concept as marriage. Mar says, why don't we just say the law is like the one who says there's no Zika? No, if we would have said that, if we just said the law is like the one who says there's no Zika, I may have said, when is there no Zika? When there are two brothers who could possibly do Yibam, two surviving brothers, then the Zika is much weaker. But of a bachad, but where there's only one brother, I would say that's a strong zika, yesh zika. So the Gemara says, well, why don't you just say the law is like the one that says there's no zika even by one brother? The Gemara says, no, yamar hachi, if I would say that, I would have said, oh, even while they're alive, even while this woman who's waiting for Yibam, you can marry her mother, even while she's still alive. You say, no, you're only allowed to marry her mother after she dies, if you had a zika with her, but not while she's alive. Why? Because you're not allowed to nullify the mitzvah of Yibam. Even though there is chalitza, chalitza is not the nullification of the mitzvah of Yibam. Chalitza is another mitzvah. So, but if you would marry her mother while you still have a zika with her, then she would go out without any Yibam or chalitza. Then you've nullified the mitzvah of Yibam, and that we're not allowed to do. So the Gemara says, Gemara goes on here, but we will stop. We'll stop at this point and pick this up, God willing, tonight. Okay, so let us stop here. Anybody have